Hello. Welcome back to another episode of Knockout Analysis, a combat sports podcast presented by CronYo Media. I am your host, Ethan Cronister. This is your co-host, Mr. Whit Barnes. We're here to talk about UFC Fight Night Card at the Apex in Las Vegas, featuring a main event of Josh Emmett and Lerone Murphy. Whit, how excited are you about this card?
You know, UFC Vegas 105 there's only going to be one of them. You know, you got Joe Anderson Brito fight week out here, you know, ready to rock out. You know, now here in the Apex, we got 314 next week. You know, this is kind of an appetizer for it.
You're damn right. That being said, for you, it is Joe Anderson Brito fight week. For me, it's Kennedy and Jackwu fight week. And we'll go from there. But we'll start at the very bottom with the least exciting fight of the card. Vanessa Demopoulos versus Talita Alenkar. What are your thoughts on that one?
I mean, Alenkar doesn't have nearly as much experience as Demopoulos. You know, it's a toss-up fight based off the odds, and I pretty much agree with that. She doesn't have any finishes at the higher level. Demopoulos, you know, she's been here for a while. You know, the age range isn't too sparse to where I'm like, you know, I'm not going to go with Demopoulos, you know. She has wins in the UFC, multiple wins. She has a finish in the UFC. I don't see any reason why I shouldn't pick her in this fight.
You're picking Demopoulos?
Yeah. Demopoulos.
Well, I'm going to have to probably agree with you on this one. The problem child, Alenkar, not a very impressive resume that she's put together so far. That being said, I'm going to agree with you. I think Demopoulos wins this fight by second round TKO.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's elite, man. I think it's going to go to decision, a smudging decision. If I had to predict on the outcome on it, you know, 29-28.
Well,
somebody's
we'll
probably making a pizza
fight.
run.
We got Victor Henry versus Pedro Falco. We've got Epic Hair versus Epic Mustache in this one. We have Mr. Henry with 7 wins by knockout, 8 wins by submission, and 5 first-round finishes. In his last 3 fights, he is 2-0 with 1 no contest. Not exactly sure what happened in that no contest. Look at his opponent, Mr. Falco. Excuse me. Falco has 1 fight in the UFC that he lost by unanimous decision. I think this one goes to a unanimous decision for Mr. Henry due to experience.
Yeah, you know, I'll take the guy with the hair on this one, you know. Victor Hugo is the loss, I believe, for Falco, and Victor Hugo is no longer in the Ultimate Fighting Championship because he can't make weight and he didn't win a whole lot of fights, you know. And also, it's worth noting Victor Henry has a win over Raoni Barcelos about 3 years ago, which is went up in value over the last few months, we can say, with his win over Peyton Talbot. So I might have to go with the experience and the long hair on this one.
Yep, I think, again, unanimous decision for the long-haired man, La Mangosta. We have the next fight is Loma Look Here and Bone Me versus Estela Nunez, who I believe you mentioned last week is the can job that Molly McCann was supposed to fight last week. That being said, we have a 6-5 Estela Nunez versus a 9-3 Look Here and Bone Me. Thailand versus Brazil, 3-inch advantage for Nunez. I don't have any confidence in Nunez at all. She's an absolute can. She's probably about to fight her last fight in the UFC and lose it by a first-round knockout.
Yeah, I mean, you won't hear me say this often about women's UFC, but the values on Look Here and Bone Me, man. You know, or lobotomy, whatever, you know. Minus 900. I wouldn't put that money up there and spend it on that, but I don't see any value on Nunes. She's 0-4 in the UFC, been finished 3 times. I think lobotomy is going to put on for Thailand, and if she doesn't finish her in a Thai clinch with the knee to the jaw, then what the hell is she doing?
Probably crack cocaine. Next fight. Reese McKee. This is the first one we'll probably spend a little time on. Reese McKee, nicknamed Skeletor, versus Daniel Frunze, nicknamed Nothing. We have a UFC debut being made for Daniel Frunze, and we do not have a UFC debut being made for Reese McKee. This is Reese McKee's second stop in the UFC. His first tour in the UFC went like this. He lost to Khamzat Chimaev via first round knockout, which is understandable. Then he lost to Morono by unanimous decision. Then he gets back into the UFC and he loses to Lusa by unanimous decision, and he loses a split decision to Njokani. Sure. I'm pretty sure we talked about him in a previous card. But he's 0-4 in the UFC, and I see no reason why he doesn't go 0-5. What do you say in the matter?
I mean, Daniel Frunze fought on the Contender Series, and I remember this fight because he was fighting a guy that was 17-1, which is really uncommon for that show. Like, nobody would wanted to really take that fight and fight a guy that was 17-1. He went in there. The guy that was 17-1, I think it was Kuti was his name, went in there like a bat out of hell, tried to finish the fight in the first round. Won the first round. He ended up gassing out, and Frunze was intelligent. He took his time, and he waited for his shots, and he finished him. And I don't see why he's not going to do that here in this fight. I think there's great value on him at -150. McKee is 0-4. His last 2 losses haven't been awful because Njokani just got a early KO on the Lidzi Vittori card, but I think Daniel Frunze, I think he's going to take his time. I think he's going to find a finish in the second or the third.
Yeah, I got Frunze by unanimous decision on this one. And just like that, we have another can fight. The Warrior Princess at 15-9, Diana Belbita versus the Witch, Dion Barbosa at 7-3. If you ask me, this is an absolute mid-off, and I don't have any stake in this fight, but I guess I gotta pick a winner, and I think I'm just gonna pick Diana, the Warrior Princess Belbita, because she has more experience in the matter.
Man, all I gotta say is Diana Belbita has wonderful hair, but what's not so wonderful is she is Molly McCann's only submission in her mixed martial artist career. And Barboza, I think she has quite a few finishes by submission, if I'm not wrong. Yep, she has a few on like the regional scene and all that. She has one on the Contender Series, actually. I think she's going to submit her pretty early on. If you're getting submitted by Molly McCann, whose BJJ is very suspect, I don't think you have business fighting the cage with the Brazilian.
Well, that Brazilian just did lose to a white girl, so
yeah,
take that for what you will. That being said, I don't really care who wins that fight. I'm just going to go with Belbita. We have our first close one on the UFC website. Lists these as close odds. We have Davy Dangerous Grant versus Daniel the Willy Cat Santos. I have no clue what a Willy Cat is, but sure. We have Brazilian again versus an England man. One of the English. Davy Grant projected underdog in this fight, 150 underdog. 9 submission wins for Grant in his 16 wins. A submission specialist, if you will. Mr. Santos, Brazilian, so you already know he's got the jiu-jitsu on lock. I think this is a decent fight. I'm not really sure which way it's going to go. I don't know. I'm going to let you go first. I do know that Davy Grant has fought Cheeto Vera twice and has a 1-1 record with Mr. Vera, which is a tough thing to do to beat Cheeto Vera, because that man, I believe, to this day still has not been knocked down. Am I correct in that?
Well, he got knocked down in his last fight, but it was not like a brutal knockdown. He did not get TKO'd. Davison Figueroa hit him with his goblin
like
punch.
A 15-year career, buddy.
No, he is a granite chin, to say the least. But, man, Davy Grant, this guy, he owns a restaurant. He's in the restaurant business. He puts up with a lot of shit. And you saw in his last fight that this man was very frustrated. He beat the shit out of 31-year-old Ramon Taveras. Like, owned the guy, clobbered him for 3 rounds. This 39-year-old Englishman just absolutely went off. And usually this guy disappears for like 8-9 months, maybe even a year before his next fight. But he was like, you know what, sign me up for another. Davy Grant, he's going to kick you out range. Very good at doing that. Very devastating strikes. Will out volume you. Daniel Santos does train at Shootbox, I believe, with Oliveira. But I don't think it's going to matter too much. Davy Grant's been in there with great guys. He's taken Daniel Marcos, who's 17-0, one of the best up-and-coming prospects in bantamweight, to a split decision. And, I think Daniel Santos, I think he's going to learn a very valuable lesson about messing with Englishmen in the restaurant industry.
So you're taking the underdog on this one.
We bark. The dogs are barking today, man.
I agree. I'm taking the underdog as well, Mr. Grant. I believe you'll win by 3rd round TKO, because you'll just be over it. You'll remember that one time that you got the poor old chap in the corner who didn't tip you, bro. And then you'll knock him out.
That is.
I will let you introduce the next fight.
We got Louis Garule and we got Ode Osborne, flyweight battle right here. I watched Louis Garule's Contender Series bout, which this will be his debut, I should mention. Nick Piccinini is a 4-time Big 12 champion wrestler, the guy he fought, but right now his striking is incredibly suspect. And Lucas Garule, who's, I don't want to be disrespectful, but he is, I think, a community college wrestler. He does have a collegiate wrestling experience. He owned them. He won 2 rounds of that fight. It shouldn't have been a split decision. He went out there and did his thing. He trains at Factory Muay Thai with Brandon Roy Valley in Colorado. Shout out Raw Dog. But I just don't think he's incredibly high level. I don't think that fight was, these guys are going to be contenders at the flyweight division type level. Ode Osborne, his record is 12-8, which a lot of people will say, oh, he's terrible. Well, he's been in there with some really good guys. And his fight with Ronaldo Rodriguez at UFC Noche, a lot of people argue that he won that fight. I'm not necessarily in that camp, but it was close and it was a war. And Ode Osborne, he has more experience. He's got longer arms. I don't necessarily believe in Louis Garule, even though he is 10-0. It's not really the highest level of competition. I think Ode Osborne's going to pull off an upset because he did start, I should mention, at a plus 150 earlier in the week when I was looking through this card, and he is now a plus 225. So the public really likes Garule. I don't see the value based off what I saw on tape.
I tend to agree with you on that. Like you said, a JUCO wrestler. I don't know, man. It's one of those things with this. This is, I believe, in my notes, I wrote this one in as a mid-off because I wasn't really enthralled by anything that I saw. But I'm gonna take the debut man here. I'm gonna take Garule by split decision.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely think it'll play out close. No doubt about it.
Well, we have the most impressive set of muscles I've ever seen on a UFC fighter on the next guy. So I'm going to let you do this one as well.
Yeah, man, we got Robert Valentin and Torres No Neck Finney. That's probably not his nickname, but it should be. You know, you guys have never seen.
His nickname is the Punisher.
I mean, shit, he is a physically girthy individual. I'll say that. You know, that's probably what I got it from. But this dude has absolutely no neck. Like, if you guys have never seen Torres Finney, those listening, look up a picture of this guy. This guy cannot be submitted, at least by a choke. I would be shocked. He is the only person to win the Contender Series 3 times to win a fight. And not only that, he did the Contender Series cycle. He won by submission, by TKO, and by decision. You know. And I get why Dana didn't really want to pick him up, because he is 5'8", fighting at 185, which means he's pretty much going to be disadvantaged at reach and height in every match he comes into. But Robert Valentin is from what's the reality show called? The Ultimate Fighter. And those guys, especially the past few years, haven't been very high level. Like, you look at Ramaska, he just fought not too long ago. He got submitted in the first round, the featherweight. Myron Santos fought a few weeks ago from the same show. He got a robbery decision. And, you know, Robert Valentin didn't even win. He didn't even win the Ultimate Fighter. It's hard for me to back him with the low level of competition. Torres Finney has fought at least the best of the regional scene on 3 different occasions, and he's came out victorious. And I think that he is going to put Valentin in a nasty sub on the ground.
Valentin has also fought in the UFC already. He lost to Ryan Loder and got knocked out by him in his first fight. So we have No Neck Finney, the Punisher, versus Valentin. Like you said, it's probably hard for him to want to bring him in. You know, he's already at the disadvantage with the height. But it's one of those also, like, Finney beat everyone that Dana White threw at him in the Contender Series. So at some point you have to give him a chance. So I'm excited to see what he can do. I'm going to go ahead and take him in this one. I think that he wins this fight by second round knockout.
Hell yeah.
And that being said, we must move on to, funny enough, I was just looking at this card that Valentin fought on, and this guy on top of him on the UFC thing, Gerald Meerschaert, was also on that card and won his fight via submission in that fight. So we have Brad Tavares versus Gerald Meerschaert, or GM3 as he likes to be called. He's 37-18 in his UFC career, or his pro MMA career, and 29 of his 37 wins have come by submission. This guy is a submission specialist. His fight against De Ridder, he lost by submission. His 2 fights before that, he won by submission. This guy knows how to get it done if you get on the ground. That being said, his opponent, Mr. Tavares, has a significantly lower fight count. Tavares also, he's a veteran of the sport, been doing this a long time. They both have. Tavares has 2 wins by submission, so submission's not really his thing. That being said, I believe that presents a problem for him if he gets on the ground with Mr. Meerschaert. I've got Meerschaert by second round submission.
I mean, I will say this is a 50-50 fight for me. I don't agree with the odds on this. If you're gambling, put the money on GM3 because he's always game. And it should be mentioned, every single fight that he's won in the UFC has been by submission. He's never went to decision. He's never knocked anybody out. He's either submitted you or he's lost. And it's incredibly impressive. I think that's some sort of record, if I'm not wrong. Brad Tavares, 4 of his last 5 fights, has been in there with some really tough opponents. Jung-Yeon Park is an up-and-coming guy. Gregory Rodriguez was just on the main event, 5-round fight. He beat legend Chris Weidman. For what it's worth, he is washed. And then he he lost to Bruno Silva, who's washed as well. And then he also lost to the champion. So he's lost 4 or 5 to decent competition. It's tough because this fight goes to decision. I think Tavares will out-volume GM3. But GM3, man, he just goes out there and he subs dudes. I think he's going to do it again. I'm going to have to agree with you, man. I think this is going to be a late sub. I think this is going to be like a late second round, third round sub. He gets victory from the jaws of defeat.
I'm taking this next one.
Hell yeah.
We got Kennedy Nzechukwu versus Martin Buday. We have our first ranked fight of the evening. The number 15th ranked heavyweight contender, the African Savage, Kennedy Nzechukwu, versus Martin Baddies Buday. So we have 14-2 Buday here, 7 wins by knockout. It's pretty much the standard heavyweight resume, but you look at his last 3 fights, he's 2-1. He has a submission win and a card against Parison, but it's hard to go against Mr. Nzechukwu. He is 14-5, 10 wins by knockout, 4 first-round finishes. There's a guy in my boxing gym. His name is Qualik. He won the Maryland Gold Gloves in 2024 in the heavyweight division. He's about 5 foot, maybe 8, and we would think he was about 230 pounds. He moves like Ilya Topuria in a boxing ring, but he's a heavyweight. It's ridiculous. It's unfair. And it's unfair to have that kind of speed advantage on people in the heavyweight division. That's exactly what we have here with the African Savage, Kennedy Nzechukwu. He's on the smaller end of heavyweights. I think he's only like 230 pounds, I believe, is what he's been fighting at. But this guy's hands are so fast. He just fights like a lightweight, but he's a heavyweight, and with the power of a heavyweight. I don't think this fight is close at all. I think this is Kennedy Nzechukwu by whatever he wants.
Mm-hmm. I'd have to agree on many levels, because Kennedy, and I think a lot of light heavyweights should do this because, he was at a crossroads in his career when he was at light heavyweight. He came off back-to-back losses. Gave Ovince St. Preux his last win in the UFC. Shout out to OSP. And then he moves it to heavyweight. Probably beats the 2 worst guys at heavyweight. But he does what he's supposed to. He knocks them out really early. He's very fluid. He's got incredibly long arms. And, dude, Martin Buday is my least favorite type of fighter. He is a cage-holding fraud, is what he is. He doesn't really have any skill whatsoever. He is 14-2, and his record is very padded. Especially here in the UFC, because he just hugs you against the cage. Because he's not faster than you, he doesn't have better power than you. And unless you're Josh Parisian, he cannot wrestle you. Like, man, your last win is a split decision against Andrei Arlovsky. Andrei Arlovsky's pushing 50 years old, dog. And you're 33.
It's crazy to me that he's still fighting, bro.
Like, he's taking fights in dirty boxing right now. He's not even in the UFC anymore. This guy's taking fights in dirty boxing. He went to a split decision with him last year. I hope Kennedy Nzechukwu starches him early. That's how he's going to beat him. I think his cardio is going to be better. I think he's going to have the lighter man skill, transitioning from light heavyweight to heavyweight. And I'm going to have to take him. I'm going to have to take him by starching him in the first round.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for too. All right, now we've got Cortavius Romeos versus Cheng Ho Lee. We've got Cortavius 5 submission wins, 6 first round finishes, and 9 wins. Coming off of his last fight, which I believe was his UFC debut, where he lost. So 0-1 in the UFC. Currently going against Cheng Ho Lee, which is, of course, a Korean. Cortavius coming by way of America. Cheng Ho Lee's 10-1 with 5 wins by knockout. This is not his UFC debut either. He did fight already and won his UFC debut. So we have 2 guys in their second UFC fight, one of which won their last fight, the other of which lost. I think by way of knockout, Cheng Ho Lee wins this fight in round 3.
We're going to be at odds with this one, man. We're going to be at odds. Because road to UFC, these guys out in Asia, they have just came into the UFC and they have not been very good. The level of competition hasn't been great over there. His only loss is the only great regional promotion he went to, Brave Combat Federation. And, which he did win at one championship. I'm not going to completely diminish it, but I just don't hold a lot of belief in the road to UFC guys until they prove me wrong. Cortavius Romeus, he has a few fights, I believe. He has some submission game, which he does have 5 of them out of his 12, or 5 of them out of his 9 wins. I don't think he's going to find a finish in this fight. I think this is going to be a very close split decision. But I'm going to rock with Cortavius. I think he's going to bounce back from his Gaston Bolaños defeat.
I think you like Cortavius because I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, you used to call yourself something of that nature whenever you were younger.
I bet I did back in my day.
But that being said, I'm going to go ahead and let you do the honors because I see a name coming up here that I know you're very partial to this week.
It's Joe Anderson Brito fight week. He's going up against Pat Sabatini. Joe Anderson Brito is one of the most slept-on prospects, especially in the lighter weight classes. And, people say, oh, he lost to William Gomez by split decision. How are you going to ride with him? So that fight, William Gomez is a Frenchman. That fight was in France. I encourage a lot of people to go watch that fight back and tell me that Joe Anderson Brito doesn't win that fight anywhere else in the world. He landed a lot more damage. I believe he controlled him longer in that fight too. It was a complete malpractice. It was a close fight, but Joe Anderson Brito, I think, was the clear winner. He has a lot of power, and he has a lot of submission victories as well. His BJJ is quite refined, especially in the UFC. He beat Diego Lopez in the Contender Series, who's about to fight for the belt here next week. He's knocked out Andre Fili, who's a very solid featherweight. And he went on a finishing streak before he lost his last fight. And Pat Sabatini, he's a little bit of submission artist himself. I've heard a lot of noise about him submitting Brito, but Brito's never been submitted. He's from Brazil. He has submission victories of his own. I just don't see him getting submitted. I see him having a massive advantage on the feet, and I think he's going to get a TKO, and I think he's going to call somebody out in the rankings.
Well, I'll start with Pat Sabatini. You mentioned that Diego Lopez lost to Brito in the Contender Series. Well, Sabatini lost to Lopez in the UFC via first-round knockout. Again, Diego Lopez fighting for the title next week, vacated by Ilia Topuria. We'll get to that later. And you look at his last 5 fights. We have 3-2 record for Sabatini, and it goes unanimous decision win, knockout loss in 1 minute, mind you. And then we've got submission win. Then we've got knockout loss by Lopez and a submission win in his last fight. So, it seems to me he either submits you or he gets finished. So I don't really see much benefit to the fighting style. Joe Anderson Brito, as you said, high-ranking prospect. 10 first-round finishes, 8 knockouts, 7 submissions. He's fought a lot of people already in his career. I'm going to go Joe Anderson Brito here, but I think this fight's going to make it to the end. I think Joe Anderson Brito by unanimous decision.
Word.
That moves us on to the main event of the evening. Josh Emmett, the number 8 ranked featherweight contender, will be fighting Lerone Murphy, the number 10 ranked heavyweight contender. So we got Josh CCO Emmett. It's got to be some kind of slang for serial killer because that's exactly what he looks like. He has a 19-4 record in his pro MMA career. This guy has 7 wins by knockout, 7 first-round finishes. We all know this man for absolutely flooring Bryce Mitchell in his last fight. Mind you, this is his first fight since 2023. And he did suffer 2 straight losses, one of which was to the eventual champion, Ilia Topuria. Was he the champion at the time that he lost to him?
He was not. Ilya was on his come up at that moment. It was a...
Gotcha.
But it should be mentioned.
Josh Emmett looks like the guy... Huh?
It should be mentioned that he did fight for that interim belt with Yair Rodriguez when he got subbed. So he was, in a way, a title challenger. But yeah, it was on Ilya's come up.
Well, Josh Emmett looks like the kind of guy that comes into the rec center on a Friday afternoon and absolutely puts 35 on your head with the most unorthodox shot form you've ever seen. Can't seem to miss. He's got the James Harden tape all over his arm. And, I mean, Josh Emmett's just a hooper. And we equate that straight into the UFC. Josh Emmett, again, his last fight, he absolutely heaven to helled Bryce Mitchell, which a lot of people love to see. Bryce Mitchell we'll talk about next week on that fight card. We'll move on to Lerone the Miracle Murphy. 15-0-1 in his pro MMA career. Current number 10 featherweight contender, as previously mentioned. I mean, obviously he's beat everybody he's faced except for one guy who, I don't know if that's a no contest or a draw. No, they gave him a draw. So, that being said, I don't really know which way this fight's going to go. I'm interested to hear what you have to say first, and then I'll piggyback off of that.
See, man, Lerone Murphy, one thing I really notice is he has no submissions throughout of his career. You know, his 15-0 is impressive. He's beaten some great veterans coming up here. He beat Danny Ige. He beat Barboza. You know. But he has no subs. He is a volume puncher. He's a great crisp boxer. But Josh Emmett, 5 rounds, can you avoid his overhand? Because that's dangerous for all 5 rounds. And like you were saying, man, like, he's that guy that comes off of a nasty lift at a rec center and comes and schools you in hoops. He just has that look about him. Like, this dude flatlined Bryce Mitchell and said, fuck it, I'm going on a 16-month vacation. That's what he did. It's hard for me to pick this fight.
He really did.
Because, well, actually, no, it isn't. Because this guy has beaten volume punchers. He's beaten Calvin Kattar, who's a volume puncher. Split decision, mind you. But I have to pick somebody. You know what? Josh Emmett, you were a plus 260 underdog in your last fight against Bryce Mitchell. You've beaten volume punishers. You're a man. You're 40. You just came back from a 16-month vacation. And, you know, you also said in your fight presser today, what are the odds? Plus 260? Bet the house on me. I'm going to go with Josh Emmett.
Josh Emmett is definitely a character. Like I said, he's built like a serial killer and a rec center merchant. But that being said, I believe, Mr. Murphy, you have met your match, and you will finally have a valid one on that record. I got Josh Emmett by second round knockout in the 5-round bout. That brings us to the end of this fight card. Don't go anywhere. We still got some things to talk about. We moved through this one a little bit quicker, so that way we could get to what we wanted to talk about at the end. Plus, instead of like the first or like the last 4 fights on the card, none of these fights are that interesting. So the matchmakers were not cooking with this card, in my opinion. But usually an Apex card is just a whole bunch of people trying to get a shot. So gotta watch them and give them a chance. That being said, we need to talk about our sponsorship that we have with our good friend Mr. Reader. Mr. Reader will be fighting the XFN 400 fight card at River Spirit Casino in Muskogee, Oklahoma this coming weekend. Same day as the Paddy Pimblett and Volkanovski card. That being said, I'm going to get with Mr. Reader this coming week and see about getting him in for the interview. Hopefully we could get him in sometime this week, so that way we don't interfere with his last week of camp too hard. Other than that, we'll be talking about that card maybe a little bit, or just previewing his fight in general. And then we've got a big card next week. Huge card. One of the biggest yet. It's in the early days of our podcast. I know Whit's excited about it. I'm excited about it. I'm just going to go ahead and dub it Paddy Pimblett Fight Week for me. I don't know who it is for him. Probably Diego Lopez. But it's Paddy Pimblett Fight Week for me. And I can't wait to see. Which, by the way, if you haven't seen it yet, watch Paddy Pimblett's last video about the retirement of Molly McCann. I don't think I've ever seen someone so tore up for one of their friends as what happened with those two at the end of that fight. But cool to see their friendship, the Scouses. But Mr. Barnes, what do you have to preview for us for next week for both Mr. Reader's fight and UFC 314?
I mean, man, I saw Mr. Reader's fight up close and personal, man, at 399. Not a lot to say, man. He just kicked the guy's ass, you know. He's trying to stay active, you know, get the kickboxing acumen, man.
He fought that guy, Mr. Barnes. His name was Chris Barnes. He fought that guy, and that was Chris Barnes' last professional fight. I believe he retired after that, but it was known beforehand that was going to be his last fight. And what a way to go out, getting flying knee to the face 2 minutes into the first round by a guy probably 10, 15 years younger than you. So Tracy did not hold back on him at all. He definitely brutally pounded that man. Absolutely zero pause. But what do you got about UFC 314? I know there's a lot of... Actually, you know what? It's not Diego Lopez fight week. I know exactly whose fight week it is for you. It's Gene Silva's.
I mean, Gene Silva, I think he's the obvious choice. He's not my favorite fighter on this card, though. Because this card, man, this card is a thing of beauty. As long as nobody pulls out, knock on wood, because it would have been Carlos Prates fight week. It would have been, but his opponent got injured. Shout out Jeff Neal. And they're going to be coming to Kansas City here in April. So it's tough for me to pick my fight week, man. Right now, though, subject to change. It's Patricio Pitbull fight week, baby. Bellator GOAT. Patricio Pitbull.
Dude,
he's about to go do his thing.
You aren't lying, man. I'm looking at this card right now. This is an absolute fucking unit of a card. The matchmakers were absolutely cooking.
It'll be
I
hard
mean, you
to
got
top
Nikita
it, man.
Krylov, Yair Rodriguez, Bryce Mitchell, Gene Silva, Patty Pimblett, Michael Chandler, Volkanovski, Diego Lopez. Speaking of, we may have to try to get some IRL kind of thing going on here, Mr. Barnes. There is
What do you have in mind?
a recent fight. There's a recent fight announced. Recent fight announced that Sean O'Malley will be fighting in New Jersey. New Jersey's not far from me.
No? Get a New Jersey vlog going?
There was two fights that got announced for that Jersey card. I cannot recall the other one at this current moment, but I do believe they were two ranked people. Let me see.
It was Juliana Pena and Kayla Harrison.
Yeah, okay, yep. There's two championship fights, and that's all they have for that fight card right now. So yeah, that's in Newark, New Jersey. That's not really that far from me. I think it's a couple hours. Could be an interesting time for sure if we were able to make that happen. Just be curious to see how much. I feel like it's two championship fights, and Sean O'Malley is probably going to be crazy expensive tickets, but we'll just have to see as that pops up. But we have both. For me, Patty Pimblett fight week, Patricio Pitbull fight week for him. Tomorrow or next week's episode is going to be a lot longer because there's a lot more fights to go through. This is a big card coming up. We have to break down in depth a lot of them. There's a lot of ranked fights in that card too. A lot of fights that can shift the tide towards potential new champions or potential jobbers, unemployment. So we'll have to see how that one goes. Shout out our sponsors, Shank It Golf. Use code CronYo Media, 10% off at checkout. Actually, theirs is 15. My fault. Cowboy Revolution. I've been going out recently, doing some things here with the kinfolk, and I've been wearing that Cowboy Revolution hat. It's been getting a lot of compliments out. Have to tell them use code CronYo Media at checkout. 10% off. Last but not least, W.GG. 10% off at checkout using the same code for your supplement needs. That being said, Mr. Barnes, what are your final thoughts on this Apex?
Hey man, Joe Anderson Burrito fight week. For you real other sickos, MMA sickos, we got PFL on Thursday, which probably will be around the time this video comes out. A lot of MMA, man.
Probably,
a lot of good fights on the horizon. It's exciting, but I'm ready to see Joe Anderson do his thing, and my advice to anybody out there would be keep your stick on the ice and watch out for the deer.
I will say that at some point I do want to start exploring the possibility of talking about some of these other leagues like One Championship and PFL and see what kind of cards they can put together, because it could be interesting down the road if we talk about them and some of those guys transition into either the UFC or the UFC guys transition into there. It could be interesting to see, because I know Demetrius Johnson had his incredible legendary UFC run and then went off and had another run and got knocked out for the first time and won championship. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, we'll explore that possibility. I think their volume is much higher and they fight a lot more. So I would have to see what we can find on that. But that being said, this has been Knockout Analysis for Fight Night Apex card this weekend. Emmett versus Murphy. I think that's who it was.
UFC 105, Vegas.
Yes. Emmett versus Murphy at UFC 105, the Apex in Vegas. That's been that. Like Whit said, keep your stick on the ice. Watch out for the deer. And for the fans of my fuel-injected motorsports podcast, when in doubt, throttle it out. We thank you all for your time. We love you. And we'll see you in the next one. Probably soon doing an interview with our homie, Mr. Reader.